Totally. Well, I think we're
Yeah.
kind of sold this myth that the early years are so taxing, they're so physical, they're so exhausting, and then the teenage years are so
Mhm.
emotionally exhausting. And we have this myth that there's this like cruise period from 5 to 12 where you're just hanging out and they're chill. And that's not true. They're still humans with a nervous system. And what we really start to see shift in this age range is that they're moving into more interdependence or independence.
Yeah.
That belonging and inclusion and social engagement really starts to skyrocket, where they start to see themselves outside of their family unit. They start to really look to peer groups and see, how do I fit in here? Or where do I fit in? Or how do I show up in these different spaces? And what does that mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for how people treat me? All that jazz. On top of that, we start to see hormonal shifts. We
Yeah.
think of puberty as being teenage years, but there's a lot of hormonal shifts that start to happen as young as 7, 8, 9 years old. And all of that is a lovely recipe for some big feelings.
I love that you have this book because what I've heard from my community as well is that parents feel like no one talks about it. So then when you're not talking about it, you don't know that it's very normal, like you just mentioned, and then you can better have the tools to handle it, right? So that you're not feeling like, God, my kid's such a baby. Why is my kid the one acting like a child? And I've heard that so many times when they are children.
They are children. And
Yeah.
frankly, I am in my mid to late 30s and also have big feelings sometimes and
Yes.
have emotions. And we often expect that we're going to teach a kid a skill and they're going to implement that all the time.
Welcome back to the show. You are listening on my YouTube channel. So remember that if you're not already, subscribe, hit that thumbs up sign because that's how the show can continue to grow on our YouTube channel, or you can listen on the podcast. I'm so excited to keep bringing amazing guests to you. And today's guest is a returning one and someone I really value in the parenting space, someone who writes some of the best parenting books out there. And yes, plural. I'm thrilled to be joined again by Alyssa Campbell, mom, author, CEO of Seed and Sow, and host of the Voices of Your Village podcast. She holds a master's degree in early childhood education, something I also love, and is a passionate advocate for emotional development in kids. You might know her from her first book, Tiny Humans, Big Emotions. She was on my show in the fall of 2024, and we chatted about that. And now she's back with a powerful follow up, Big Kids, Bigger Feelings. I'm holding up the book if you're watching our YouTube channel, Navigating Defiance, Meltdowns, and Anxiety to Raise Confident, Connected Children. And something that I'm really, really enjoying because I have a 5-year-old who is really right in this age group. And we're diving into a group today that often gets overlooked, those 5 to 12-year-olds who aren't quite little kids, but not yet teens. It's kind of like that song, like that Britney Spears song's like, I'm
I'm
not a
not a
girl,
girl.
not yet a woman. I'm not a preschooler. I'm not a teenager. It's that middle ground area. And we're talking about this because this is the age that often gets misunderstood or left out in these feelings conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Alyssa.
Yeah, I'm so jazzed to be back here with you today, Mona. I was thinking like we were talking about this book, and when we were getting it all set up, we were talking about how it's like this too old for tantrums, too young for teenage drama, and where do they fall?
Yeah. And I'm so glad you wrote this. And now, my question to you, which I cannot remember, did you already have the idea of this book when you were writing the first one? And did you write them together or no? You wrote one, stopped, wrote this one? Because it obviously it's coming out very close together, meaning 2023, 2025, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we published Tiny Humans, maybe a month after, we had just in that whole month after, what we continued to hear was like, this is awesome. And what do I do with my 9-year-old? Or what do I do with my 7-year-old? And there was just such a hunger and a need for this next age range up. And my editor reached out, and I was a billion weeks pregnant. And she reached out and was like, "Hi, will you write the next age range up, please?" And I was like, "I need a nap. I'm so tired."
Yeah.
And then I think it was like 5 days postpartum, I signed the contract for this book and started writing in, it's kind of at the end of my maternity leave. Like, it was actually a nice, like, escape for me into back into work where I could just get into like writing in a creative space. And I really welcomed it coming out of my maternity leave.
Yeah, you were creating a human and then now you're creating a book for so many parents to have. It's art and it's creation and I'm so glad you did it. I have not yet read it. I'm excited to have it. I own it now. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just so excited because I think it really is a smack in the face for a lot of parents because they're like, "Wait, what? Like you're supposed to you knew all this stuff that we talked about emotional regulation and why is it that you're having such extreme feelings?" And
Yeah.
from personal experience, what I found with my son is that it wasn't that he was having more frequent tantrums. The meltdowns were more spirit like spaced out, but that there was still obviously these big moments that just felt like avalanches. And so I'm really excited to dive into that. And you write about the ages 5 to 12 are filled
Mhm.
with big feelings and big behaviors. So what's happening? I always like doing this with you. What's happening developmentally that makes
Yeah.
regulation especially tough at this stage and maybe what parents may not understand or may have misconceptions about for this age as well.
Totally. Well, I think we're
Yeah.
kind of sold this myth that the early years are so taxing, they're so physical, they're so exhausting, and then the teenage years are so
Mhm.
emotionally exhausting. And we have this myth that there's this like cruise period from 5 to 12 where you're just hanging out and they're chill. And that's not true. They're still humans with a nervous system. And what we really start to see shift in this age range is that they're moving into more interdependence or independence.
Yeah.
That belonging and inclusion and social engagement really starts to skyrocket, where they start to see themselves outside of their family unit. They start to really look to peer groups and see, how do I fit in here? Or where do I fit in? Or how do I show up in these different spaces? And what does that mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for how people treat me? All that jazz. And for us on the outside, it's like, oh, they're 6. Like, they know these things. You're old enough to know how to do
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. You're old enough to know better. And for them, it's this internal fight of, oh, I was so focused on me and
Yeah.
me in my family unit and me in my home space and my relationship with my parents or maybe siblings. And now there's this world outside of home and this whole other space where I'm learning about how I fit into that world and how I show up there. And on top of that, we start to see hormonal shifts. We
Yeah.
think of puberty as being teenage years, but there's a lot of hormonal shifts that start to happen as young as 7, 8, 9 years old. And all of that is a lovely recipe for some big feelings.
Oh, yes, and I think that is exactly the issue that I'm seeing online. Like, I had shared a story about Ryan having, this issue and meltdown, and he had started saying things like, "I don't like mommy time," and things like that,
Mm.
and I took it as, like, getting curious about why is he saying this stuff? Obviously, he loves me, but he's obviously upset with things, and when I shared that on my story, so many people were like, "How come nobody told me that my six-year-old would be a teenager and, like, that this is
Yes.
hard?" And I love that you have this book because what I've heard from my community as well is that parents feel like no one talks about it. So then when you're not talking about it, you don't know that it's very normal, like you just mentioned. And then you can better have the tools to handle it, right? So that you're not feeling like, God, my kid's such a baby. Why is my kid the one acting like a child? And I've heard that so many times when they are children.
They are children, and
Yeah.
frankly, I am in my mid to late 30s and also have big feelings sometimes and
Yes.
have emotions, and we, often expect that we're gonna teach a kid a skill and they're gonna implement that all the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know that when I get to parent in that lovely hour from, like, 4 to 5 where my kids come home from childcare and school, and they are overstimulated and spent, and they're looking for connection, and it's almost dinner time, and they both need me in different ways, and my husband walks in, usually around 5, 5:15, and I know when he walks in at that moment that it's not best for my marriage to be sarcastic and snippy and rude.
Yeah.
I know that when I'm in a regulated state. It doesn't stop me from doing it sometimes when he walks in, he's like, "Hey, what's for dinner?" And I'm like, "Nope, wrong question, my friend. How can I best support you? Hey, let me take a kid. Let me jump in and make dinner." Those are great things at that moment. But what's
Yeah.
for dinner always hits me the wrong way. And I have this skill set. I have a skill set for
Yeah.
regulation and for operating with self control and being kind and communicating. It doesn't mean I always have access to that skill set.
Absolutely. And I've been there. I think everyone listening is going to be like, "Yes, like if something just comes over you and it's like all of a sudden you're like feeling that." And I think we expect so much more from our children than we do ourselves sometimes, especially these
Mhm.
kids between 5 to 12. You expect them to have it all together and that why are you melting down? Like it's not that big of a deal. And
Yes.
I love that we are reframing this conversation around, "Hey, they are still processing, they're still growing, their brain is still developing, and even us as full-grown grown-ups with hopefully fully developed brains still
Yes.
have those moments." So now imagine a child's brain who's still under construction here. So again, I really appreciate that. Now, from the first book that you wrote to this book, starting off, what would you say is one of the biggest sort of things that you wish parents would drive home about this age group besides what you just said? Like in terms of whether it's an approach, whether it's our mindset, or whether it's, how to tackle those sort of big feeling moments with those older school age children.
Totally. So much of our work looks at the nervous system first and
Hmm.
recognizing that it's not a one size fits all, that the way that my nervous system operates, the way that I take in stimuli around the world and process that and make sense of it is different than the way that my husband does. It's
Yeah.
different than the way that my son does. My daughter and I are very similar. So we have our five senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. We often learn about those five. And we can think about there are some people who are more smell sensitive, who like really acutely notice smells. I have a friend in my life who's very smell sensitive and she'll like vomit with certain smells. She's just like, oh, it gets her
Wow.
right away.
Yeah.
And I am more sound sensitive and, like, bless him, he's incredible, but I married a drummer, and there's just so much tapping in my life. I'm
Oh
like,
my
"Oh my
gosh.
gosh." And when that tapping is happening at, like, 8 a.m. and we've had a good night of sleep and things are chill, it's fine. When that tapping is happening at, like, dinner time, I want a divorce, right? Because I'm,
Right
like,
after he
so
asked you what's for dinner, and then he's
yes.
like, boom, boom, boom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I want a divorce. So really looking at like
Yeah.
how we're processing this stimuli and this information. My husband is visually sensitive. So for
Yeah.
him, if there's like clutter in a space that really adds up for him and it's really draining for his nervous system, I'm the annoying partner who like makes piles everywhere. Like the mail comes in, there's a pile on the table. My mom used to joke you could always tell where I've been in a house because I've left a trail of stuff. It's like I kicked my shoes off here, my phone's there, my purse is here. And for my husband, Zach, that's really overwhelming for his nervous system. What we do in all of our work in Tiny Humans and in Big Kids and in our work at Seed is first dive into the nervous system and help you understand how your nervous system works, how your child's nervous system works. We have those five senses, and then we have four others that are often not talked about. We have our neuroceptive sense. This is our
Mhm.
spidey sense. It lets us know when there's safety or danger. It's always on the lookout for danger. You know that feeling if you like walk into a room and people have been in conflict and they're not arguing right now, but you can feel it in
Yeah.
the room. Like that's your neuroceptive sense at work. Or if somebody says, you're like, how you doing today? And they're like, oh, I'm fine. Your neuroceptive sense says, oh, that doesn't sound fine. There's something else about this. And so it's always on the lookout for danger. We call it your spidey sense. We also have our proprioceptive sense. This lets us know where our body is in relationship to other things. So my proprioceptive awareness is pretty low, which means I bump into things all the time. I have a hard time knowing like where does my body end and something else begin. I
Yeah.
will like bump into the side of my bed when I'm walking by. I'll bump into the table or the chair as I'm walking by. My brain has a hard time recognizing where do I end and that thing begins. And because of this, as a human with lower proprioceptive awareness, I have a higher proprioceptive need, which means I need more of that proprioceptive input. I like hugs. I like deep pressure. I could have a massage for 4 days and I'm like, I want more, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am the one who, as a teacher, I wanted a kid to sit in my lap while I'm reading a book. Or as a parent, I loved baby wearing, or I want to have them on my body. I love that. For someone who gets like touched out from that, they don't like that deep
Yeah.
pressure, they might have higher proprioceptive awareness. They might have like a bigger space bubble where they're like, yep, you're close enough. That's great. Because their brain clocks, oh, my body ends here. That thing begins over there in a way that mine doesn't. We then have our vestibular sense. This is responsible for like our movement, our balance. It lets us know that we're right side up. It keeps us right side up. And so you access this through moving the plane of your head. This could be being on swings or dipping
Yeah.
upside down, like in a downward dog pose, or spinning. And for some people, they are vestibular seeking. This is my son and husband. My husband sits in an office chair that can like spin so that he can kind of rock throughout the day, like a swivel chair. I sit in a stationary one because I'm vestibular sensitive. If I have
Yeah.
too much of it, I get motion sickness. And then we have our interoceptive sense. This is how we notice those cues inside, like I'm hungry, I'm tired, I have to go to the bathroom, or my heart's beating fast. It's where we start to tune into a lot of emotional regulation, is really through your interoceptive sense, because you can start to notice what you're feeling inside before you explode. So we have 9 total senses there. And what we do is we really help people understand, what are you sensitive to, and then what are you seeking for regulation? And what does that mean for how you move through the world? My son is sensitive to most of the 9, which means he is really aware of his surroundings.
Yeah.
He knows where his body ends and something else begins. He has a high neuroceptive sense, which can lead to things like people pleasing, because you want to keep the peace. You want everything to feel good so that you can feel good. He's um, sound sensitive. He's visually sensitive. He likes order in his space. If you move something, he notices. If you change something out, he notices. And so for him, his brain's working so hard all day long to process all this information. Now imagine he's in school, he's in a classroom, and there are people moving out of their
Yeah.
desks. You're moving from place to place. There's stuff on the walls. There's sounds everywhere. There's different smells everywhere. And his brain is constantly noticing all those details. It can get so overwhelmed and fill up really fast and needs a break from the stimuli to regulate. If you are a sensory sensitive adult, you might be someone who's like, all I want is to lay in a dark room where nobody's talking to me and nobody's touching me and nobody needs anything from me, so I can just like be for a
Yeah, that was
second.
me on Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when we're seeing this,
Yeah.
what we're really seeing is that your nervous system's flooded and overwhelmed. And what we get to do on our end is help you notice that and be able to figure out what's going to be most helpful for that unique human to access regulation throughout the day. Because then you have someone like my daughter who doesn't notice the details of anything for the most part. And she will like process the information pretty quickly because she doesn't notice if something moved in her environment. She
Yeah.
doesn't hear all the sounds that my son hears. For her, she's proprioceptive seeking. So she's like, I want to be on your lap, in your space, in your face. And for my son, every time somebody's close to him, he's like, okay, that's close enough. And so, really looking at how do their brain and body work then helps us understand how to support them in navigating the day. And how do I respond to this unique child when they are having those big feelings? Because it's not one size fits all.
Well, that is why I love Seed and Sow and your platform. And then obviously when you started writing books, because you understand completely that no two children are alike within the same family, twins. I mean, I see this all the time. And sometimes that's why when parents get parenting education online or generalized advice, it can feel like, well, that doesn't work for my kid, or that's not
Mhm.
something that's going to work because of this exact reason, right? I mean, there's obviously different senses, there's different ways that we communicate with the world. And so I love that you bring that into this because it's so important to remember that. And you mentioned, your son's example of, all that sort of who he is and how it might show up in a classroom setting. How does understanding a child's nervous system and sensory profile help parents respond with more compassion or better strategies during an actual meltdown, or let's say even defiance? Maybe we can give two
Mhm.
examples of like a 7-year-old being very defiant with the boundary when maybe when they were 4, they weren't defiant with that boundary. How might we approach that based on understanding their nervous system?
Yeah, so love this question because it really helps us dive into the unique individual here.
I love it. Yeah.
When we are looking at this, say you have that 7-year-old who they're slamming the door, they're rolling their eyes at you, they've got a snappy, sarcastic quip right back at you. What we're really seeing there is an overwhelmed nervous system. They're saying, I'm dysregulated. It's me when my husband says, "What's for dinner?" And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know. What'd you plan for dinner, bud? Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not from a
Yes.
regulated state. It's not because I'm regulated and I'm accessing self control. That is a sign of dysregulation. And when we can recognize that first and say, okay, on the outside, they're not two and they're crying, they're not throwing something or biting or kicking. What does dysregulation look like? When we can first stay in that space and say, okay, I know that when they're being defiant, they're actually dysregulated, we can then start from a place of compassion where we can say, okay, that's what's happening here. Now, how do I support their regulation first? If you pop in when I'm sarcastic and snippy and rude to my husband, and you're like, okay, Alyssa, take 3 deep breaths and like over
Yeah.
my dead body, right? Like right now,
Yeah.
this is a him
Yeah.
problem, not a me problem. And so, really understanding the unique human is going to be huge. That the way that I respond to my son versus my daughter is going to be different. In the moment, my son needs me to talk the least amount. He needs me to reduce stimuli wherever I can. So if we have music playing in the background, I'm turning it off.
Mhm.
If there's a show on in the background, I'm turning that off. If there's a bunch of noise or screaming happening, I'm saying, let's go up to your room or let's take space in this place. You're not in trouble. I'm not mad at you. I'm going to help your body calm so we can do this together. And really coming back to, I'm just going to help his nervous system get to a feeling of safety so that he can then navigate any conversations about the behavior or what's going on for him or what to do differently. So often we jump in right away trying to solve it. We jump in and we're like, what's going on, bud? Tell me what's happening. What's
Yeah.
coming up for you? Are you feeling mad? And for a lot of kids, that's so overwhelming and they're so flooded that really what we need to do is focus first on who is this kid? How do I help their brain feel calm? My daughter, because of how her nervous system works, she actually does like when you talk to her more. And so for her, I'm going to come in and say, oh man, you really wanted to do this. And I said no. It's so frustrating. You feel like all your friends get to do it and you're going to feel left out. I get that, babe. I'm going to help you figure this out. I'm on your team. But I'm going to be talking to her because for her, that's very regulating. When I'm talking to my son, he continues to escalate. He needs silence and space first to calm, and then we can have that conversation. So, first and foremost, is knowing who is this child. We actually have a resource in the book, a QR code you can scan, or you can go to seedquiz.com. And it is a free regulation questionnaire that you can take as many times as you want for all the humans in your family, all different age groups. And it'll help you understand who is my kid from a regulation standpoint, what is dysregulating for them, and then what is regulating for them, and give you different strategies based on different age groups. And so that you then can know, okay, in the moment, what does this kid need for their unique nervous system?
Such a great example. I love it. And I'm by the way, I'm waiting for the 3rd book, which is going to be like a marriage one. Like big adults, bigger feelings in marriage or in relationships. I mean, this is valuable information. And I've said this time and
Yeah.
time again, like what we're doing here is not just useful for parenting, right? I mean, this is
Mhm.
useful for any communication tactics with anybody in our lives, our coworkers, the loved ones in our lives, our partner. I mean, this is communication skills, right? Understanding what other humans need and understanding that no two humans, even grown-ups, are alike. And giving the example you gave of you, I love that you're talking about what happens when your husband walks in and asks for dinner because that is a relatable situation that so many adults find themselves in that can really give a window into what a kid may feel like when we try to talk too much or say this or hey, yeah, you need to take a breath or you're feeling really upset. Like it really is a personalized thing. And I don't think many parents realize it until maybe they have it come up and they're looking for help, or maybe they have two children finally and they're like, wait, wow, like this is completely different. Like I just got used to this with my first. I thought this was the norm. And then I had a second kid. And now I'm like, my eyes are opening on like how they're completely different children. And I've known that, but it's even personally seeing it as a mother. I'm like, wow, yeah, look at this nature situation going on. Like, look at how they're completely
Yes.
different with what you just said on like how they're taking in the world, what they need during the meltdowns. And, I have at the time of this recording, I have a 5.5 year old and a 2 year old. And I see my 2 year old and I always talk to my husband. I'm like, wow, Ryan was so different at that age. Do you remember what Ryan needed at 2? Do you remember how big his meltdowns were at 2 and how he needed this? And like, Vera, my little Vera is like, she screams, and you're like, Vera, we're not doing that right now because of this. And she's like, okay, mommy. And I'm like, what just happened here? And I know that's going to show up later in different ways,
Yeah.
but it's different. And it doesn't mean one is better or worse. It's just understanding and respecting the beautiful differences in our children because they exist in us too. And I love that you
Yes.
do that. And one thing that you talk about, and I want to clarify, I don't know, facts, the facts
Yeah,
process.
that's in this book. Mhm.
Is that just only in this book, or is it in your other book and part of Seed and Sow as well?
That is something we use at Seed. So we do a lot of work in school systems. In
Yeah,
fact, the bulk of our work at Seed is in school systems. And every school that we work with, families get access to our resources that
love
way. So
that.
we're really looking for like how do we impact the whole like system, right? And when we're doing this work with school systems, we found that we are always coming back to these 5 components of regulation that we're guiding teachers and schools to really look at as a first and foremost. And it's the facts. We look at food. When was the last time this kid had food that nourishes their body?
Hmm.
Are they hungry and hangry? Are they on a sugar crash? Where we actually recently came out of, and I share this in the book, where we had been like on a family vacation and all of a sudden the kids are melting. And I'm like, what is going on? And my husband was like, well, all we had for breakfast was donuts. So probably we're all melting, and really looking at like, yeah, love donuts. They're going to be a part of our life. And if that's all they have for breakfast, I got to expect a sugar crash at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
And so we have food, we have activity, and this is where we bring in that sensory work of what is a regulating activity look like for this child? Are they proprioceptive seeking? Have they had access to that deep pressure or to heavy work or to climbing or jumping or moving their body in that way? Are they vestibular seeking? And if that's the case, do they have opportunities to kind of spin or swing or move? My son's vestibular seeking. And so at school, he has this little seat. We partner with a company called Bouncy Bands at Seed. We do a lot of work with them where we're bringing their tools and resources into schools. And this seat is called the sit and twist. And he can move it from his chair to his spot in the
nice.
rug to anywhere. And he can just kind of twist in it like you would in an office chair that moves, like my husband does all day
Yeah,
long in his chair. And then we're looking at like when was the last time they had access to that activity to regulate their nervous system. Then we have connection. Connection is something that for some folks, it can feel like a leaky cup where it's like, I just spent time with them
yeah,
and now they need more and more and more. And what we're looking at here is, are we connecting in the way that this child receives connection? Also, is this child highly connection seeking? We have some kids who don't seek as much connection for regulation and some kids who seek more connection for regulation. Again, with my son and daughter here, and my husband and I, we recently we were going on this trip, and so we had carved out time ahead of time where we would each have solo time. So before our trip, I was like, "All right, why don't you take Saturday for a chunk of Saturday? Go ahead and do whatever feels good for you." And we carved out time for it, and then I did it on Sunday. His Saturday time for what was going to be regulating for him was to be totally solo. He went
mm,
to um like a record store and did some shopping. He took himself out to lunch. Like he was solo. My time that was regulating was with friends. I went out to dinner. I went thrift store shopping with my friend. Like I love connection and have a way higher connection need than he does. And so when we're looking at this in kids, we're going to see some kids who have a higher connection
Yeah.
need, and really looking at how do we meet that. And we provide strategies for that in the book for different ages of like, can they FaceTime a friend? Can they FaceTime their aunt or somebody in their life if you're not available right then? Can they play games where they're connecting with other peers, even if they can't go over to their house in this moment? Are there ways that we can establish connection support for peer to peer, sibling to sibling? And we outline a bunch of different ways that we can access connection that aren't just from the adult down. And then also from the adult down, what does it look like to connect with them? It doesn't always have to be this like, oh, I'm going to have this one on one date with them on a Saturday. In fact, often what's more powerful is they're going to come home from school and I'm going to carve out the first 10 minutes to not be getting dinner ready or doing all these
Yeah.
other things, but instead to like sit with them while they have a snack and color with them or hear about their day or do an activity that feels good for them, depending on their nervous system and who they are, where they get to choose it and we're just hanging and they're not required to use their cognitive brain to do homework yet or to do a task like putting their things away after school yet, but they just get us for 10 minutes. What does that look like? And so we look at connection and really differentiating what does that mean. And then we look at tune out. That's the
Mhm.
like, I need to lay in a dark room and have nobody
Yeah.
talking to me. And so, when was the last time that they had a break from stimuli where they could just chill? And then we look at sleep. Are they just tired? Right? Like, we have a rule, there's that like big thing that a lot of people will say in marriage. I was just at a wedding and people are like, one of the rules is you don't go to bed angry. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so not one of our rules. Because if I try to have a conversation about what I'm angry about before bed, it's like gibberish versus
Yeah.
if I go to sleep and I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, I actually don't hate you. I was just tired. And so really looking at like how far are they from sleep and are they tired? And really what they need is just to sleep because we've been up later or it's the start of school and they've been getting up earlier and their body's just exhausted. And so when we're looking at this as a form of supporting regulation, we look at these facts first. How are we supporting these five things? And after we can check off, like, yep, great, they've had food, they've had activity, connection, tune out, sleep, then we're going into some emotion processing work of like, okay, now what's lingering for them emotionally? Once we've supported the nervous system regulation, is there something coming up for them that we need to navigate some emotion processing around?
I love that. I love your acronyms. I mean, we're gonna get into more, but I love them and it's just right on. I mean, these are the basic foundations for so much of our emotional regulation, like you just mentioned. And also within these, as we know, how unique it is, right? I mean, talking about sleep as well, right? I mean, we know that some people are okay with less sleep, including children, like high
Mhm.
sleep needs, low sleep needs is a reality. I didn't, I again, having my 2 children was a smack dab in my middle of my face of like, wow, like one kid, if just missed bedtime, breaking down, the other one could miss a nap, although they would take the nap and they'd be loving it, miss a nap, emotional regulation was fine, not too many
Yeah.
meltdowns. So it was so important. And going back to like myself, my husband, we both have high sleep needs, but like, how much the lack of sleep impacts me. And I love what you just mentioned about going to sleep, sometimes you may have to go to sleep angry because my husband is a night owl. Like, love him to death, but he is a nocturnal human being and he loves to have meaningful conversations when I'm about to go upstairs. Like it's 10:30, we
Yeah.
were in the same room doing work or he's reading, I'm reading or whatever, and then he's like, what do you think, the meaning of life is at 10:30? And I'm joking, but like it's like philosophical. I'm like, yo, it's 10:30. We need to yeah, we can't do this at 10:30. Is this a is this a long conversation? But exactly that. Like I need to go to bed. I have to be up earlier. Like I cannot be doing that. And that's just a prime example of how we may be different. The sleep needs are different and how I need to get my sleep to be a somewhat regulated human being. And he may be better when he's not sleeping and not as irritable, but it's so important to stay in tune with that.
Totally, 100%. And I feel like it just gives us more compassion for kids. We went to an amusement park with the kids last week and we had 7 kids from 1-year-old to 16-year-old.
Oh, yeah, wow.
And it was a blast.
Yeah.
And it was so much stimulation and we stayed up later and they had ice cream to end their day. And then as we were leaving and going home and putting all these humans to bed and getting the bigs ready to go to bed, everyone in their own way was melting, right? And
Yes.
like for
Yes.
some kids, it was like there was crying happening. For some kids, there was door slamming happening. For some kids, there was defiance happening. For some kids, they were in like shutdown mode and now they're annoyed at their sibling who keeps talking to them. And so for all of them, there was different expressions of dysregulation
Yeah.
happening. But for all five kids, like their facts were not all in check. For all of them, they're like, yeah, I just ended my day with ice cream. I'm overstimulated. Maybe my connection needs have been met throughout the day. I definitely need to tune out and I need
Yeah.
to sleep. And so, like, right now is not the time that I'm teaching new skills or even talking about their behavior. Right now, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep everyone safe and we're going to move through and we're going to get to bed. And tomorrow we might talk about, like, hey, even when you're mad, you don't get to do this to your sister. I'm going to help you
Yeah.
figure out some strategies for when you're mad so that you're not hurting her or saying things to her that are hurtful.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. And I love that you gave that good example of so many different children from many different families having that experience, and you're like, and it's so, I think it's just so important for parents to understand and be insightful and get curious, right? Get curious
Yeah.
about how that shows up. Like the example I give is, I know when my 5.5-year-old son is on the cusp of a meltdown, like he does these behaviors that me and my husband have now figured out that this is not visible to most people that he's about to get dysregulated, but he starts to, I don't know if it was you that I talked to this about, but he starts to rage clean, which is so interesting.
Uh-huh.
Like, and I'm like, he maybe, I don't know if you've seen me do that, whatever, but he'll just start cleaning the kitchen counters with a mop, and I'm like, that's not what we do. We don't ever, me or my husband never clean kitchen counters
Hilarious.
with a mop. But he's like starting to get into that dysregulation. I turn to my husband, I'm like, sweetie, he's about to melt down, so we need to really, again, get into a quiet space, because it's usually when my younger daughter's yelling or doing her
Mhm.
pterodactyl scream, or there's just a lot of commotion in our small space, and he is a very sound sensitive kid. And so
Mhm.
it's like, hey, let's go outside, let's go for a walk, or why don't we go pick some flowers? Or that insight helps us avoid the meltdown. And
That's
sometimes
right.
it doesn't, right? Sometimes we don't
Totally.
catch it because we're human, but I think it's just so valuable. And I feel like if you can get that as a parent and really tune in, you'll be able to really help them through a lot of those, avoidance, but also just say, hey, even if we find ourselves in a meltdown, I understand what you need. Like you beautifully just described that you're different than your sister, or that you may need to be
Mhm.
pulled upstairs to just, again, not a punishment, but like a, let's reset. Let's just
This is
like
what
bring the
your
volume
body
down.
needs.
Yeah. I do
Yeah.
want to talk about your other acronym too before, but you have some, yeah, before you,
Yeah,
yeah.
just that I feel like we do this more with younger kids, and then as they
Yes.
get older, we're like, "You're old enough to know better." Right? It's
Yes.
like the phrase that comes up a lot. We hear it in schools, we hear it in families, and it's this age bias where we think kids should just hit a certain age and now they have access to all their skills all the time. And what we find is that unless we teach them how their brain and body work, they don't necessarily know how to access regulation and then navigate conflict. Those are skills we have to teach. You don't
Yeah.
just turn 8 and you're like, oh, now I know how to calm my body and communicate. And if they can tell you outside the moment, I know I shouldn't hit my sister. I know I should do this. I know I shouldn't do that. I should do this. If they can walk through that, but they can't access them in the moment, that's always a sign to us that they don't yet have the self awareness of when
Yeah.
it's building and what it feels like for them when it's building, so that then they can access regulation. And they might also not yet know how their body calms, that maybe their body is a body that needs to move. Maybe their body is a body that needs space. Maybe their body is a body that needs validation and for somebody to talk to them and to be connected to feel safe. And so when we can understand that about them and then teach them how their body works, it's a game changer for them. But they don't just hit a certain age where they have that. We have to teach that.
And like I was saying before, you responded with that, is one of the other acronyms that you talk about is something called the CEP method. So describe what that is. How does it help kids, especially at this age, process emotions instead of suppressing or acting them out?
Yeah. So that's what kickstarted this work for me. It was that I was working with my colleague Lauren Stauble, and she said, "Hey, I feel like we're doing something different." We were both teaching at the time, and we started like collaborating, doing video lessons, et cetera, and really diving into like what were we doing and how is it different. And then we outlined what we were doing. And we're like, great, let's find the framework for this and see if we bring it to our school administration, if they're open to like us diving into this school wide, et cetera. And as we were looking for the framework, we found bits and pieces in other frameworks, but nothing that was comprehensive to what we were doing. So we ended up outlining what we were doing. The collaborative emotion processing, CEP, method is what it's called. And
Yeah.
it's 5 components. And we researched this. We partnered with Brandeis University and we researched it across the US. And that was what Tiny Humans was really like, sharing that research and that data. And it is applicable whether you are 2 or 12 or 42 or 62. We go through these same phases of emotion processing to process emotions, and that is one of the 5 components of SEP, is the adult child interactions. How do we lead kids through this process of really processing emotions? The other 4 are about us as the adult. So looking at what's
Yeah.
our self-awareness? What tools do we have for taking care of our nervous system, our true self-care? Do we know how to take care of our nervous system throughout the day? Are we accessing that? What is the scientific knowledge here? We get nerdy with folks and diving into things like mirror neurons and how
Yeah.
if I show up with this tone,
Yeah.
then their body is on high alert. They can't calm down. Their body says, don't let your guard down.
Yeah,
This
I got
person's
scared
here
for a
to fight
second
you.
there,
Yeah,
girl. Yeah, I was
that's
like,
right.
"Whoa, what did I do?" Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Versus if I come in, I'm like, "Hey, bud, what's going
Yeah.
on here? I
Yeah.
wanna figure this out." It sends a different message to their body since we dive into scientific knowledge, and then we look at our biases. Things like the age bias of, do we feel like they should reach a certain age where they just know better? Are
Yeah.
there certain biases we have around gender and expression for emotions there? We dive into a lot of that, of like, what did we learn from our childhood, from our social programming? What were we bearing witness to that now lives inside of us as something that we believe to be true, that's going to pop up at these different times? And defiance is a big one of those biases, where a lot of us grew up in households where we were taught that respect was of utmost importance. And to be honest, I also want to raise respectful children. Like, that's
Yeah.
on my docket. Am actively working to raise respectful humans. And that for me doesn't mean what it meant to my parents, that it doesn't
Yeah.
mean obedience. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that they don't get to ask why about something. It doesn't mean that they don't get to have a voice and opinion. It does mean for me that we're going to speak kindly to each other, top down. I'm
Yeah.
also going to speak kindly to them, that we are not going to hurt each other or the things in our household or in our environment. And that for us is the basis for respect, and that from there, we're going to talk about hard things respectfully. They do get to challenge me respectfully. And they're going to make mistakes as they learn that along the way. And sometimes that's going to show up as defiance.
I love this. Alyssa, every time I talk to you, consume anything of yours, again, I cannot wait to read this. Is actually I'm reading actually at this moment Outlive,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
a
yeah.
wonderful, wonderful
Yeah.
book. It's actually what's inspired a lot of the writing of my book, which is why I'm reading it, not just for learning, but also just for inspiration. And
Yeah.
then this is next because again, I just love the way you really go down to the foundational importance of understanding why. I think
Mhm.
so many parents, the reason why they meet a lot of this sort of friction and butting heads is that they're not really getting into the why and really putting themselves into this world of like, hey, what am I bringing to the table? I mean, you just mentioned that, right? With our own
Mhm.
self awareness, our own self regulation, and the tone, right? I mean, how
Mhm.
many times am I in offices and I'm just with my families and they're like, he never listens. And I'm just hearing how the mom is talking to the child. And I'm like, kids are not going to listen if they don't feel listened to. Like, if they don't
Correct.
feel like we're listening to them, they're just not going to want to be receptive to that. That's like
Yeah.
really hard for them because if you're yelling and snippy all the time, that's just the energy level that we need to change in that home. I
That's
just
right.
love this conversation. We could chat for hours. What would be, for a parent who's feeling stuck in power struggles, let's say with a,
Mhm.
kid of this age, what's one shift that you wish that they could make today to better support themselves and support that emotional connection with that child?
My one hope for folks reading this book and diving into this work
Mhm.
is to remember that we're in a relationship with another human.
Yeah.
That you're not just in charge of this other human, but that you're in a relationship. And especially as they get older, when they were younger, we would carry them to bed. We could buckle them
Yeah.
into the car seat, even if they're screaming. As they get older, we can't physically do that in the same way. And it really requires us to keep coming back to being in relationship with them. And
Yeah.
that requires us to do things like say, man, I lost my cool earlier and I'm sorry. Or, man, something's going on here. It's been really hard to get out the door for school, and I don't know what to do, but I wanna figure this out together. And really being in relationship with them
Yeah.
and recognizing that that's what we have. That's what's so powerful here is for us to be mindful of our ego and our assertion of dominance and control in order to be in relationship.
Beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful, and thank you for coming on, and
Thank
your book is
you.
out now. If you're
Mhm.
seeing this on YouTube, you can see the book. We'll be linking it if you can't see it and you're listening on the podcast, Big Kids, Bigger Feelings. And if you haven't read her other book, which was Tiny Humans, Big Emotions, obviously really important for that younger age. Both have really great tools. Where can people go to stay connected? Obviously, where can they get the book, but
Yeah.
also just follow the work that you're doing. I love what you're doing, and I love that you're going into school systems. Parents are part of this, school systems are the other part, and we have to hit both angles to
Yeah.
really see change. So, where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, so come on over. We have a podcast, Voices of Your Village podcast, and an Instagram, seed.and.so. We have a website, seedandsow.org, SEW. And if you want to bring this to your child's school, if you're a parent that's tuning in, you can always reach out to
Love
us
it.
at support@seedandsow.org, and we'll get some questions from you, find out where you are, and we'll take it from there and see if this is some work that your kid's school might be interested in diving into.
And I hope every school does. Again, the work is amazing. It's so
Thank you.
needed. Thank you so much for coming back on. Congratulations for book number 2.
Thanks.
And you let me know when you want to talk about that third one about marriage. I cannot wait.
I love
Thank
it.
you. And for everyone tuning in, as you can hear, the conversations I have with Alyssa are nothing short of phenomenal. The last episode that we recorded came out in October of 2024, which was her first book. And this one really, again, is amazing. So please follow her. If you love this conversation, remember that you have to share it on social media, do a screenshot, tag both of us. All the details on who to tag will be in our caption. And also just spread it. Even if you're not sharing on social, just send it to other parents, school systems, because this is how we get her message, my message, all of these messages on raising emotionally intelligent children. This is how we do it. So thank you. And again, thank you so much for tuning in and for our guest today. And I cannot wait to chat with you all next time.